Iran launching a new wave of missiles at Israel today, and Israel saying it began another wave of large-scale strikes on Tehran and also struck Hezbollah command centers in Beirut. Meantime, Azerbaijan promising to respond to attacks by Iran on its territory, and Saudi Arabia and Qatar saying that they had intercepted missiles and drones. Joining us right now is Council on Foreign Relations President Michael Froman. He served as U.S. trade rep in the Obama administration. Let's start maybe at the question of maybe at the end, which is, how do you see this ending, Ambassador?
Well, Andrew, it's a good question because it depends a little bit on what your objectives are. I think from the U.S. point of view, the objectives are to prevent Iran from having the ability to project power outside of Iran. And that means their nuclear program, their missile program, their proxies, and their Navy. And you've seen action on all those fronts over the last couple of days. From the Israeli perspective, I think they want to achieve regime change, and so the interests of the U.S. or the objectives of the U.S. and Israel aren't completely aligned. And the question will be, if it's regime change, well, how do you end that? It really depends on what is going to happen there in Tehran in terms of succession to the Ayatollah. Will it be another Ayatollah? Will it be the IRGC? Will it be chaos and civil war? There's just a lot of uncertainty right now. On the purely military side, U.S. and Israel are striking hundreds of targets, being quite effective in doing so, and defending fairly well the Iranian strikes of drones and missiles, preventing almost all of them from getting through.
But there are still missiles. So the question is, if the whole goal is just to take out the military complex, to take out all of the military or all of the missiles that could even be shot at, or drones or other things, is that a week? Is that a month? Is that much longer? This is before you even get to the regime change piece.
I think the military experts think it's a matter of weeks, not necessarily months. Again, it depends a little bit on what it means to get rid of all of them and all the capacity to build new missiles, which the Iranians have shown a capacity to rebuild their missile production facilities. One of the big questions, Andrew, that we're not really talking about is, what about the 450 kilograms of enriched uranium that is still in Iran? What's happening to that? Who is securing that? Because ultimately, if you want to make sure that they don't have a nuclear program going forward, you want to move that enriched uranium out of the country. That's enough enriched uranium, evidently, for 10 bombs. Not ideal. There's not bombs that can be necessarily sent on a ballistic missile, but you want to get rid of that uranium as safely as possible.
And how would you imagine we would go about getting that?
That's beyond my capability. That's probably a special forces kind of action. If they know where it is and they're able to secure it, that's a whole other kind of.
Do you think there's going to be boots on the ground? I mean, that is a central question, and we've heard, frankly, from some Democrats who came out after seeing some of these classified briefings, almost suggesting that they think that something like that could happen.
Yeah, I think the president is pretty determined to avoid the kind of forever wars he's criticized in Iraq and Afghanistan, and putting substantial boots on the ground. He probably comes out of the Venezuela experience feeling pretty confident and emboldened that small surgical strikes, including in that case a small number of boots on the ground, were able to achieve certain objectives. It just becomes a slippery slope. So I think they're going to try and do as much as they possibly can from afar, from the air, from naval assets, and avoid putting boots on the ground to the greatest degree possible.
How much distance do you think there is between the U.S. and Israel on the ultimate question of regime change, and how far either country would otherwise go without the other?
Yeah, I think it was unclear in the first couple days of this attack exactly what the U.S. objectives were. We heard different responses from different people in the administration, from the president on down. I think they've now have clarified what their objectives are. There is some different objectives between the U.S. and Israel here. I think stepping back from regime change from the U.S. perspective, I think is part of answering your previous question, which is, regime change is very hard to do from the air. You can't. It's very hard to do. And so the U.S. doesn't want to get dragged into something that involves substantial commitment on the ground. Israel is more determined to make sure there is a new regime there. Ultimately, we're having more cooperation with Israel on this action than we've ever had before. There's more collaboration, cooperation, planning than ever before, and so I wouldn't want to overstate the differences here. But there is a difference in emphasis, I would say, in the ultimate objectives.
Ambassador, if we were having this conversation in May of this year, so call it 2.5, 3 months from now, what do you think the conversation would be?
Like it could be it's on a spectrum of possible outcomes. I mean, I think the concern right now is that has the leadership sort of devolved decision-making authority, for example, to the military? Is there going to be a lot of chaos? Is there centralized control? Are these attacks on neighbors, on Azerbaijan, potentially on Turkey, which would potentially involve NATO coming into this? Are these being made by a central leadership? Is there central leadership making this, or are we going to have chaos? So in May, you could have chaos, you could have civil war, or you could have a succession and a different kind of regime. And there's all the permutations in between. It's just too early to tell, Andrew.